Richmond GalaxyCon, are you ready? It is my lovely duty, along with this 501st Honor Guard, to please welcome to the stage. He is an Olivier and Tony Award-winning actor and director whose body of work on stage and film includes, and make some noise if I mention something you like, Dragon Slayer, Britannia, Faith Healer, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and more. Today he joins us to discuss this fantastic career, as well as the rise and fall and resurrection of Sheev Palpatine, known to a select few as Darth Sidious, known to most as the Emperor. Please welcome Ian McDiarmid!
I'm still alive.
Woo!
Thanks, boys.
Our thanks to a round of applause for our 501st partners. They do a lot of charity work. Check and see where the chapter is. They have a little booth down on stairs. Thank you again.
They're so well trained.
I wonder where they got that from.
Yes.
Absolutely. Oh, sir, welcome to Richmond. So glad to have you here.
This is great to be here. It's the first time, and nice to see all of you. And well, I've just come from Kansas City, where they said you're very welcome to barbecue, and I've yet to find out what I'm welcome to here. But no doubt in the next couple of days you're going to tell me what's extra special about your food.
Well, again, we had a wonderful conversation a couple years ago online, which covered most of the base stuff about your evolution in the role. So I just have a few things I just want to throw out real quick. And again, I like to pluck a little something non-Star Warsy. One of your earliest on-screen roles was a particularly well-regarded episode of The Professionals, which is a crime story. If those of you don't know, it's like Starsky and Hutch cranked to 11. And you played a very interesting character. How did that come about?
No, really. It was the first time I got to kill people on camera. And it was, no, he was a rather disturbed guy, actually. And he had some, I think it was his father died in very difficult circumstances in hospital. So he decided to take his revenge out on the medical profession. And the character became a kind of sniper and picked off nurses and so on. You can see where this is going. But in the end, I got my comeuppance, and I was shot myself by this very good actor, well-known British actor called Martin Shaw. And we had the whole of the Wembley, yes, you remember him? He's great. The whole of the Wembley Conference Centre to run around before I met my end. But that was fun. Big television show and lots of energy.
Absolutely. Since our last conversation, we agreed that every time you thought you were done with the character of Palpatine, there was an email.
Exactly. So, which is why I had to point out to you this evening that I'm still alive, because it was a very big surprise when the last invitation came from J.J. Abrams, who said, no, he's not dead, you know, even though all that, you know, journey down the chute, obviously he wasn't in a good condition. But what I always say to people who say it's a little bit, you know, odd that he should still be alive considering what he's been through, and I said, well, Palpatine always had plan B and C and D and E and F should the occasion happen where he was almost incapacitated. So although his body was in a bad state, and actually he was in a worse state than you actually saw on your screen, they had me all sorts of limbs all over the place, and we thought that might be a little bit sick. But while the body was weak, the mind was sharper than ever. And he'd been planning for ages using clones and lots of Snokes.
You recently returned to the character on Obi-Wan.
Yes.
Yes, what was that? What was that like?
That was a surprise. I just came, yes, I came, a hologram, you probably saw it. And I came on at the end and I had a few lines to say in London while everybody else was in either San Francisco or Los Angeles, I can't remember what it was. And the director had to get up at 6 a.m. to talk to me on a big screen in London and take me through the scene. But it was an interesting scene, and it was nice to be in touch with Anakin once again, if only by hologram. And it was interesting how that scene sort of developed, and then they decided they weren't going to go there. I think that Palpatine was a little worried that Anakin had still got feelings, even though it was a long time ago, for Padme, and that would often, probably weaken his resolve in getting on with the business of doing what Palpatine wanted him to do. But that little storyline wasn't followed. Probably with too many things going on. But, you know, if they ever go back to that period, who knows?
Absolutely. And well, the hologram shoot, which is, I assume, pretty easy. You don't have to wear the full costume, just sort of the headdress.
Yeah, no, it was full makeup, you know, because they could do it digitally, but they don't want to. They want to recreate it the way it was first created.
Sure.
So I was in with the makeup, and I don't think it was my original costume. It might have been the original clasp, which they've preserved for ages. I tried to steal that on the first film, but no, they won't get out of that. But, I said, well, it's not valuable. It's made of plastic. You just went out to the shop across the road and bought it, didn't you? And they said, yes, but it will become iconic. That was a word I didn't know then, you know. I subsequently got to terms with it over the years.
Before I jump into this audience and start taking these wonderful questions, on behalf of myself and everyone else, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for your talents, your professionalism, and the performances you brought.
You're a very good sample of the people whom I ought to thank for making him the creature that he became and continuing to be interested in him. And people say, God, you've been in all those films. And you know the phrase, third time lucky. Well, I think I got lucky for the third time, you know. The first time in Return of the Jedi, second time Phantom Menace, and the following prequels. And then the last time they brought me back from the dead. And so it's been a very important part of my life. But I always thought it'd be a character people would hate, and that was part of my job in a sense, you know, to be hated and loathed and despised as the most evil creature that was ever spawned. But every now and again, especially in America, people would stop me in the street and say, "We love you!" So I would say, well, I've totally failed, but thank you.
Oh, thank you for indulging my capricious curiosity. I'm going to go out in our audience now.
Okay.
All right, gang. Just remember the rules, one question at a time, no requests, and... Step into the square. Hi, what's your name?
Alex,
Hello.
I just wanted to ask the worst possible question.
Okay. Oh, I've had a few of those. Yeah.
Does the Emperor say do it while having sex?
Say that again.
He wants to know, while the Emperor is enjoying a personal time with a preferred partner, if he says, do it.
That's a very compromising question. And all I can say in answer to it is, the Emperor's private life is his own affair.
There you go. And to everybody else in line, remember, this is a general audience show. Thank you. So. Hi, what's your name?
Hey, my name's Laurel. Hi, so I was born in '77, so of course I've loved Star Wars my whole life, but I'm also a big London theater fan. Here's my proof. Big Almeida theater fan. And I lived in London in the late 90s before Phantom Menace came out. And I would randomly see you sometimes wandering around, sometimes in central London, sometimes in the West End, minding your own business, like you're a normal person or something. And
Almost. Yeah.
and I would leave you alone because I mind my own business, like I was a normal person too, maybe. And I've often wondered if, you know, because no one would recognize you from Return of the Jedi just wandering around the streets, except for me, because I was a fan already of you and your other work. But did that change after Phantom Menace came out, when suddenly people could recognize you walking around? Were you able to still walk about unencumbered?
Yeah, I am most of the time at home. I think that's also got something to do with the nature of the character. People are a little hesitant, although you love me, a little hesitant about approaching. But it's true, yes, it was my real face, a little bit of makeup, a bit more hair. I should have kept it really, but there you are. And I was exposed for all to see. But people at that time, with Phantom Menace anyway, were still sort of making the connection. I mean, you know, you guys were way ahead, you know, Sidious, Palpatine, all the rest of it, what was going on. So, also, they didn't really know who the Phantom Menace was, nor did I. I remember Ewan saying earlier, "Oh, for God's sake, Ian, what kind of a title's that?" And I said, "It's me, Ewan." But well, of course, when I first met George for the prequels, he didn't tell me I was Darth Sidious. He said there was this other character lurking in the background who worked his evil ways, and he'll come into the movie every now and again. And I remember thinking, oh, that's the part I'd like to play. And then on practically the first day of shooting, when I saw my name opposite this name, Darth Sidious, I thought, God, it's me. And I've said this before, but hardly anybody on the movie knew it was me, because these scenes were all shot separately. And I think it was actually on the London premiere when it was Liam. Liam came up and he said, "It was you, you bastard." I said, "So nice to see you again, Liam. It's been so long." You know,
All right, first of all, it's a return of the Jedi, for sure. Okay, all right, maybe. What's your name?
My name is Aaron.
Hi.
I would like to talk about, want to know your time filming on one of my favorite Tim Burton films, Sleepy Hollow. What was that like for you?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was a great time. It was full of a lot of British character actors who didn't know how to behave themselves on set. You know. Fortunately, Johnny Depp and the great Tim Burton were alive to our senses of humor and, in fact, encouraged it. One scene in particular, the cameras are going around us, and you know we were all variously terrified of the awful, you know, monster, the horseman, and so we were looking fearful and so on. And the camera just panned round slowly, each one in turn. And when it got to Richard Griffiths, he was fast asleep at the rehearsal, and Tim said, "Don't tell him, don't tell him." So the camera panned round, all of us looking, you know, terrified, and Richard being fast asleep, and that was a good comic moment. But Richard never forgave me for that. He said, "Why didn't you wake me up?" I said, "Well, Tim thought it would be funny." He said, "Oh, okay, good idea."
Hi, what's your name?
Matthew,
Hi.
what was it like getting to fight Sam Jackson in Revenge of the Sith?
He was very good at it. And I wasn't quite as good as Sam. In fact, I was terrible. I hit him accidentally, of course. And he was very kind and very gracious and so on. But it was just as well I destroyed him later, you know, because clearly that wasn't a relationship that was going to last. No, seriously, I hardly did any of that. I had to do the close-ups, obviously. But most of the brilliant stunt double, who even looked a bit like me, did most of the work, for which all of the other actors were very relieved, I can tell you.
Hi, what's your name?
My name is also Ian
Oh,
Morrison.
Hey. Hi, Ian.
Hi. I was wondering, other than the fact that when Star Wars came out, it was a huge hit, bigger than anyone thought it was going to be, what was it about Palpatine or Star Wars in general that really made you want to do it? Was there something about it that reminded you about, like, say, books or movies or plays that you grew up with that you loved?
Well, I was lucky to get the opportunity, frankly. It came out of the blue. But as a kid, when we used to play games and so on, I always plumped for the villain. I thought it was the best part, you know. If it was Robin Hood, I wouldn't just be the Sheriff of Nottingham, I would be King John, because he was worse. so I always gravitated towards that, and I'm always fascinated by the devil, and I've played a few devilish people. Told you about the professionals because you've asked over the years. So to play this part, I could sort of do it with a real intention, and also great actors of the past whom I'd admired being evil, not least the great Christopher Lee. You know, to find myself in the same room with him and then on the same set was an extraordinary experience. But the great gift of that film is, of course, I've been able to develop evil, and the enormous bonus of The Rise of Skywalker was to actually find out that all of the evil acts committed throughout the Star Wars saga were either directly or indirectly brought about by my character. So I thought, that's great. I am the most evil thing that's ever stalked the earth in a movie.
Great question. Oh, wait, hold on. Hey. Here. You're wearing a Superman shirt, so you get a green one. Get it? Hey, what's your name?
Hello, I'm Raymond, and I'm basically a Star Wars addict because I basically watch all the reruns, and I've even dressed up as Anakin Skywalker for Halloween at work.
Okay.
Yep. So, based on watching episode 6, The Demise of Emperor Palpatine, and then fast forward to The Rise of Skywalker, which we saw the resurrection, or was it the clone of Emperor Palpatine? So basically I'm wondering, did Palpatine survive all the way to Rise of Skywalker, or was there a clone created prior to all the rest of the Star Wars got made?
No, he was the real thing. He remained alive, and all these interesting small people around him, his support system kept him alive. But I'm sure he'd read the books, and he had, well, in those cases, the DVDs. I think he had, probably, of course, he could have AI'd himself forever, couldn't he? But I'm afraid to say that I think it's still his own horrid, putrid flesh that you see, certainly as far as the face is concerned. But I'll let you into a secret, or maybe some of you know already. I didn't know I was going to lose my eyes. They didn't tell me when we were shooting those scenes. So later on, when I saw the sort of preview before the film was released, I suddenly saw I had no eyes. But that was in order that later on, when my brief reign returned, my yellow eyes could once again pop out of the screen, and I was able to use my favorite phrase about them, and thank you, Frank Sinatra, "Old Yellow Eyes is back."
Hi, what's your name?
It's Aaron. Again, my thing is for you again. You're a stage actor as well. You're a theater actor. Do you have any specifically memorable stage performances that you just always go back to and you'd love to do again?
It's usually the last one that you remember most, and also it's. I went to Broadway with this play called Faith Healer, which you referred to earlier, and that's a wonderful play by the great Irish writer Brian Friel, and it's about 3 characters, 2 of whom, I'll spoil it for you if you ever go and see it, are not alive, and 1 of whom is, and I was that one. It's about a healer who goes on the road. Is he a fake? Is he the real thing? He doesn't really know it himself. Sometimes what he does works. He heals people. Other times he's just a phony. And the character I played was his sort of manager. And the other character in the play is the woman who loved him and with whom he was in love. But the great thing about it on stage is they never meet. They tell their version of their relationship and their story. And all of the versions are different. And that's what makes it interesting and engaging for an audience. I mean, they believe what they're saying, but when you recall the past, often you elaborate on it, and you remember the good times and dismiss the bad times, or remember the bad times and forget the good times. And that was a wonderful play. I'd done it in Ireland, where Brian comes from, and then in fact, it started at the theatre I used to run in London. Went to Ireland with a different cast, And I was on stage. We met in the wings before the show, but as I said, never on stage, with two great actors, Ralph Fiennes and Cherry Jones. But what we always did every night, we did this Madonna-style jumping up and down, holding hands together before we went our separate ways. And the song that Teddy, my character, loved was Fred Astaire's version of The Way You Look Tonight. So we used to sing that to ourselves before we went on stage. And the night we knew the critics were in, well, on Broadway you don't know when the critics are in because they come over different nights for a set period. But you always know when the New York Times is, because everyone behaves as if he can't possibly be in tonight, so you know for a fact. So we'll never forget the three of us jumping up and down, singing The Way You Look Tonight, thinking it might be our last appearance ever. Fortunately, he liked it, and it went on.
Cool. Great question. Thank you. Hi, what's your name?
My name is Eric, and my question is, of all the Star Wars movies or the TV shows, what has been your favorite form of media to play Palpatine?
Yeah, I mean, favorite's always hard. I mean, as I said to you, Palpatine was the sort of luck of my life in a way. But as far as the theatre's concerned, I'm about to do a play in Chichester, which isn't far from London, called The Caretaker, and that's written by the late, great Harold Pinter, who was certainly one of our great playwrights. And he's an old tramp character I play. And he's got a few laughs in it, I think, too. But he's wily and I hope sort of understandable in a way. So that's what I'm looking forward to, always wanting to, slightly twisting your question, always wanting to look on to the future. And the one I hope I can get to after that is King Lear, because I'm the right age.
Well, thank you. Hello, what's your name?
Audrey.
Hi, Audrey. What do you want to know?
Hi.
I guess I just say, yeah, so for like context, I myself am a theater student in college, so like I definitely like really appreciate all of your work and like all Shakespeare periods, especially because like part of like what ends up getting me into it is like seeing like a lot of like interesting actors, like finding out, oh, this person who played Palpatine also was in Hamlet, and like then I go on to love those shows. But I guess yeah, so yeah, I really appreciate like all of that work. But I guess yeah, like sorry.
It's all right.
Take it over. I know. You're good.
So I guess my question would just be, as like having been in the theater and movie industry and like all sorts for like quite a long time, how do you have any like advice for any like pursuing like actors or interested in the field?
Well, this is going to seem a bit glib, but the best advice is in two words with which you are all too familiar. Do it.
You got him to say it with gusto, so you get 3 red ones. and it's a acting. I'm a professional actor myself. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. No, seriously. But
Yeah.
I'll look forward to hosting you on stage.
There you go. There you go.
Hi, what's your name?
Name is Miles. The question to Ian is, reflecting on your role as Emperor Palpatine, how do you initially approach this character, and how has your portrayal evolved over the years?
Yes, you probably know that when I first saw him, because I didn't know anything about him, and when I was cast, I knew he was called the Emperor of the Universe, which seemed like the kind of job you weren't going to turn down. But especially when you knew the director was George Lucas and it was Star Wars. But beyond that, I knew nothing. And the script came very late, as it always does, because it's secret and all that. And I didn't have any idea about him. And George didn't tell me anything, what's new. And I went in, and slowly the character evolved through the makeup. The great Nick Dudman was responsible for my face. I'm sure George had it designed in advance, but he built it on me, and so that was exciting. So I slowly emerged, and I remember saying to Nick, "How can I help? When you're doing that?" He said, "You could fall asleep." So So, which, in other words, he wanted a very still face. And when I woke up and saw the face in the mirror, I screamed. And then after that, I thought, oh, I think I know how this guy might sound. So that gave me the voice. And then when I saw the set and the chair and the vast room, and it was big, it wasn't digitally created, it was a big room, I thought, oh yes, this is a man who enjoys power. So I was sort of gradually building the character, not in the usual way. You know, you get a script, you work it out, you think, I might do this, I might do that. You talk to the director, you turn up, you do it a few times, and it happens. But then I had the great gift of going back. And George was very clear that the senator should be what he described as an ordinary politician. Is there such a thing as an ordinary politician? Anyway, in other words, a guy who didn't draw attention to himself, who got on with the job and was probably rather good at it, and everyone thought he was just fine, not very charismatic, but okay. And that was clever, you know, because that was Palpatine's device. So it was wonderful to play the senator, for example, as an ordinary politician. But George said a great thing to me. He said, now your face, Ian's face, you should think of as Sidious's mask. So, of course, I was being the ordinary politician, not doing anything special, certainly not doing anything in inverted commas evil, but all the time I had this feeling that underneath was this creature who at one point would burst forth, and by God did he burst. And then, of course, we went to Rise of Skywalker, and I thought, well, this is someone who's severely disabled. And very bitter, even more bitter than he was before, who didn't have power, but had been rebuilding his empire bit by bit, and was going to go full guns for absolutely everything, but didn't figure on his granddaughter.
Hi, what's your name?
My name's AJ, and it's really a curious piece of trivia, but would you like to know where Order 66 actually came from?
Tell me.
It's a little bit of a hint. It's 21 minus 87 equals 66. And it's from this short film which inspired George Lucas. George Lucas's concept of the Force, as well as Whaley, his whole filmography, by this abstract film director named Arthur Lipset. And here's a short quote from him.
Of the contemplation of nature and in communication with other living things, they become aware of some kind of force or something behind this apparent mask, which we see in front of us. And they call it God, or they, depending on their particular disposition. To the question...
You mean feelings or thoughts? Of some aspect of it?
Of some aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
To me, is not the same thing as a world full of human beings. There's something gone. There's something missing.
And then the people say, well, this is good. Let's have more of it. And somebody walks up and you say, your number's 2187, isn't it? Boy, does that person really smile.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
I'd also just felt that 66 was a kind of satanic number, used in certain disgusting rituals. But in the film, it was we were all surprised when George in the script did what he did, and that's, of course, when the Emperor, if you didn't think so before, became truly monstrous. He wanted the kids dead.
Hey, what's your name?
Thomas. So, George Lucas, ever since the beginning, had a vision of a prequels, and even when he sold Star Wars to Disney, he had visions for sequel trilogy. So I wanted to know what it was like to work with such a visionary director and storyteller.
Yeah, well, of course it was great. He's a very unassuming man and very direct. We got on very well. We're the same age, etc., etc. And he's a man of few words on the set, you know. His view of things is he casts you because he thinks you can do it. And he's got a good instinct and feeling, you know, with the help of casting directors and so on, for the right people for the part. In my case, I was very last minute because it wasn't supposed to be me. It was supposed to be a much older actor who ended up not being able to be insured. I never really found out, didn't really want to know. But I think it was something to do with the fact that he couldn't take the contact lenses. And they were, in those days, they were made of glass and they were quite tough under the lights and so on. But so I guess I was lucky, really. I don't think it was as a result of George seeing, well, it wasn't, seeing a lot of people and then deciding I was the best person for the part. He'd heard from the casting director, who was a brilliant casting director, a woman called Mary Selway, that I had recently played in the theatre, in a small theatre in London called the Theatre Upstairs, the aging, decaying Howard Hughes, or sort of, in a play by Sam Shepard called Seduced. The character in that is called Henry Hackamore, but it's pretty obvious he was based on Howard Hughes. And Mary had said to George, he's just played Howard Hughes, he's in his late 30s, and he's entirely believable as this old, decaying, you get the picture. So that's how I got the part. But having got the part, I suppose he didn't have to keep asking me back, as it were, certainly not for the prequels. So he obviously felt that I was doing, you know, the right sort of thing or a decent job. And on set, he would say very little to all of us. Usually, great, or more intense, or go again. So that was, I'm slightly exaggerating, but these were the kind of directions he'd give. And also it was fine for me because I had a very strong character. You know, a man who was obsessed with power and, you know, wanted to get it at any cost. So I had a very strong framework on which to build. And in answer to your question earlier, you know, I've been around evil characters since I was a kid. So I had a sure way in. The younger actors, who were all great, they, you know, they were cast because of their qualities and their acting ability. And they had frustrating moments sometimes because George wasn't able to give them the information they needed. And that was because he hadn't fully decided what the situation was going to be. So Ewan, for example, would come in and face a green screen and, you know, tennis balls who were the enemy. We were all prepared for that. But George sometimes couldn't tell him what the nature of that enemy was. In other words, was it something you just shrug off and move on to the next thing, or was it deadly evil, life and death moment? So every now and then, you know, everyone would try everything. And then in the editing room, you know, George would put it all together. And sometimes, this is true of other movies, not just Star Wars, sometimes when the actors saw those moments, they thought, oh, well, if I knew it was going to be that, I'd have done it this way. So that was a source of frustration. But the great thing about movies now, having moved through the digital age, I know we're not out of it, great filmmakers like J.J. Abrams move back to film and try and do as much as they can, like the old way, if you like, not with giant screens and video villages, but with straightforward, simple cameras, and quite often non-digital cameras. But I think, of course I do, that we get, if we're good, we get the best of both worlds.
Indeed. Hey, what's your name?
Zach.
Hi.
First, thanks for coming to Richmond. It's super exciting to see you. I think one of the main reasons why a lot of fans really have remained attached to Palpatine, particularly from the prequels, is the dialogue. It became like kind of iconic and sort of campy, and the way you acted it was, you know, truly unique to yourself as an actor. So I guess I just had a question generally about the dialogue. You know, obviously the do it line is famous, and your dialogue about Darth Plagueis with Anakin. So I guess I just had a question about, were there any particular dialogue scenes that kind of stuck with you at the time where you're acting them, and did you expect any of them to kind of have the legacy that they...
No, I had no idea that these certain words would become iconic. But the great scene, as far as I was concerned, and I think Hayden would agree with this, was the scene in the opera house, the ballet or whatever it was, the Darth Plagueis scene, as you said. That's when it was really meaty stuff. and also great to act, because that scene was originally going to be in another huge office, you know. And George used to say, I used to say to him, God, it's another big office. I thought you might do that digitally. He said, no, power is about big offices. We've got to do this, you know, properly. But then he said, well, we've been in the offices quite a lot. Let's go to the theater. And you'll like that, Yen, you know, because you like the theater. But the great thing about that was I could talk to, and we were in 2 chairs just like this. I'm actually in the Anakin chair at the moment. That was my chair. And there were 2 cameras just underneath us, particularly underneath me to make me look as hideous as possible. So much for ordinary politicians, you know. And no, that was fine. That's what I expected. And the great thing about that was we talked to each other, of course, but then we could go and pretend, really, to look at the show, which was a squid ballet, if you don't mind, and while thinking our thoughts, both of us. And that was an enormous gift to the playing of the scene, which was already very well written. It's a good story. And then you mentioned Do It. That was a pure accident. That was, you know, when I had to be indirectly responsible for the death of Christopher Lee's character, which is painful to all of us. And Anakin was hesitating. And that's when Palpatine was slightly revealing the Sidious element a bit more than he should. And also we'd shot it several times. And one I just went, do it, like that. And George said, that's the one. But we didn't know what would happen subsequently, yes. And now, of course, I see it every minute of the day.
There you go. Thank you. Great question. All right, we have time for one more. What's your name?
My name is Walter.
What you got?
Speaking of the digital era, what has been your favorite internet meme surrounding your characters? And well, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well, I'm not a great meme fan. I think I should sort of catch up, really. I like something dark side. I think that's quite witty, and of course I have to discount the rumor entirely that if you come to the dark side, you get cookies. You get sweat, blood, and a lot of hard work. Okay.
Oh. Before we conclude, any projects or anything else on the docket you're allowed to share with us?
No, just the one I mentioned, The Caretaker. If you happen to be, which I probably unlikely, if you happen to be in Chichester, which is an hour's train journey from London, in June and July, I'll be playing The Caretaker by Harold Pinter. It's an emotional part for me too, because Harold, great writer he was, gave his last great play to the theatre that I used to run in London. So all of that's going on. But it's a wonderful creation in itself. In fact, it's one of the masterpieces of the last 40 years, I would say.
GalaxyCon Richmond, this was Ian McDiarmid.